It takes stupid to a whole new level. And I say this, I think it's the stupidest film I have ever seen.
Is it more stupid than Angels and Demons?
Oh, yes.
Really?
It's more stupid than Angels and Demons.
Well, no wonder I loved it. Hey, have you seen that film where Gerard Butler gets fired into space so that he can defeat the weather? Hey, have you seen that film where an actress who looks like Brie Larson but isn't Brie Larson is driving the president through a field of lightning? Yeah, you know it. It's the one where there's an intricate spiderweb of satellites all across the planet encasing it completely in a weather-beating device. Anyway, welcome to Geostorm. So, in the future, the weather is awful. It's like global warming and stuff has like nearly destroyed the planet, and there's all these disasters and stuff like that. So the USA and China come together to build this fantastic machine, and it's like I said, it's a huge web of satellites and stuff that are set all throughout space. Well, not all throughout space, like a net around the planet. So the USA and China come together to create this machine in space that like sits just above the atmosphere, and it's like a web of satellites that communicate with each other to like stop the bad weather before it happens with like, I don't know, science and shit. Like it drops little science pellets down. You see in like the opening sequence, there's bad weather and it drops the science pellets and then it's gone in like little puffs of light. And apparently, I forgot to research this, and I don't really know what it's about, but there was like some tale of a Dutch boy who plugged a dam by putting his finger in the dam. And so what they named this thing after, because they're plugging the dam, is a Dutch boy. And I think that's just such a terrible name. I hate it. I hate that it's called Dutch boy. It's a wonderful space weather changing machine, so I'm here on out going to refer to it as the Weatherboo Kalamazoo. Normally in a Hey Have You Seen I would have some popcorn as well, but instead I'm just having a little bit of a rum and coke because I didn't really like the sound of me chomping on popcorn and talking with my mouth full or editing around it, so I've dropped the popcorn today just to give myself a bit of a break. We've had like the intro scene that tells us all about like the origins of the Weatherboo Kalamazoo, and then we're in like a courtroom or something, and Gerard Butler is sat there and he's being told off because he did something that he shouldn't, and he's the guy responsible for, like, he built the Weatherboo Kalamazoo. And like this opening scene is really, I think, to establish him as like a guy who doesn't like authority and he doesn't follow the rules, and he's a bad man. And like he's mocking the old dude that's sitting on the panel that's interviewing him and being like, you haven't been up there, or I haven't seen you up there doing the hard work and the building and the science. You're just a politician. And he's sat there like, we have to punish you. You punched an inspector. And Gerard Butler's like, yeah, well, he was about to electrocute himself. And I think that that's just not necessarily a great excuse, because you could have just done literally anything else other than punch someone if they're about to get themselves in trouble. Or maybe that's deliberate. Maybe the script is supposed to lead us to believe that he's just showing us the guy was stupid and he deserved to be punched. Anyway, Gerard's American accent in this film is very dodgy. Like, there's quite a bit of Scottish sneaking in there, right? I'd let him sneak in here. All right, sidebar. So let's get this out of the way, right? Gerard Butler was part of my awakening as a homosexual male. And as a teenager, I very much went down the route of like not addressing that part of my brain until I was like 20. So those kind of things I just avoided and never explained to myself why I avoided them. And I didn't know until later. So when I was a teenager and I saw Gerard Butler, like, in some silly movies, like, what was it, P.S. I Love You or something like that, then I was like, oh, something's happening. And so then I never saw 300 until I was like 23. Like, I spent all of my teenage years just avoiding it and not looking at it. And that was in a time when teenagers were super edgy and loving 300 because it was so cool and dark and like extreme and comic booky. And I just didn't see it because I knew that it would be emotionally painful, because I was actually like literally in love with him. I think he was the first person I was in love with. And so then it was like, I don't know, cut to nearly 10 years later, I guess, before this whole thing kicked off. And then I finally saw 300 when I was in university, and I was like, oh, it's all right. now, like, I'm over it, okay? Like, I'm past it. The emotional connection isn't there anymore, but I do, obviously, he's still really hot. Like, he's really hot. And he looks really good in this film. He's got, like, kind of, you know, wrinkles around the eyes and stuff. He's aging really, really well. And he looks really great in it. It was so weird, right? Like, I literally just avoided anything that had him in it. I used to write in forum RPGs, and I wouldn't write with the characters who were using Gerard Butler to portray their characters. Literally, you can't even explain it, and you don't realise it until you're like, you know, 10 years later and you're looking back on it and you're like, oh, that's what was going on there. And I didn't know that yet because I hadn't unlocked the gay door yet. I was just filling it with progressively more stuff like Monica and Friends and that cupboard at the back of the living room. So now we've had that sidebar. Anyway, he's like causing trouble in this court case, and like this like assistant or his best mate or something is like texting him being like, shut up, shut up, shut up, you're ruining everything. And he doesn't shut up, and so then at the end of it, he finds out that the smarmy best friend is going to be running the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and Gerard Butler is fired. Actually, this part of the movie is where you learn that the characters, well, you probably actually knew that beforehand. This is where I learned that in this movie, Gerard Butler's character's name is Jake. Like, there's just a spiritual connection for us. Like, I'm going to drop it now because I don't want to date this video, because he strikes me as the kind of guy inevitably that's going to do something hugely problematic, and then I'm just going to be looking like an idiot when eventually he's inevitably done something incredibly, like, I don't know. He's of that generation, you know, that's probably unfair to speculate. Anyway, I'm just going to keep rolling. So Jake Rudd Butler has been, you know, taken off of the special division of the Weatherby Kalamazoo or whatever. And so then whatever. Now we're in the desert. And I'm thinking like, oh, is he like joined the army or something? But no, he's not there. It's just like a bunch of army people, and they're in the middle of the desert. They're wisecracking, they're chatting, they're driving along, and then they find like snow. And when they go into this little village that was in the middle of the desert, everyone's frozen solid, like, you know, day after tomorrow style. They're just statues. And then like a soldier takes one of their hands or something and it snaps off and it's like, bleh! And everything's just like frozen in place in the middle of the desert. And it's like, oh, what's going on? And then we're in the White House, and there's like this actress who I thought at first glance, I was like, oh, it's Brie Larson. That's cool. I didn't know she was in this. And it turns out it's not Brie Larson. The actress is called Abby Cornish, and she's great. She's cool. I was like sad and glad, you know. And it turns out, right, the Weatherby Kalamazoo was what froze the village in the desert. Ugh. And it turns out that it's on the fritz, like it's going haywire. It's a bit wonky. Like one of the satellites, the one that was responsible for that area, I guess, was like, it's gone, it's a bit wonky, it's done something wrong. And the president says that there's only one man that can fix this, and guess who it is? Yes, it's Jake. No, not me. Remember, Gerard Butler's called Jake in this one. Like, what a 180, right? Like, unanimously, everyone just like hated him. What, like 30 seconds ago? I don't know how much time that is canonically, but they were all like, no, you can't be trusted, you're not responsible for this. And then suddenly they're like, he's literally the only one that can help. And it's like, was he literally like screwing every bolt himself? Because surely that's not how these kind of projects work. It's also where you learn that somehow exclusively Americans like own the whole project and they're running the whole show, right? Like it's an American thing. And in a few weeks, they're gonna hand over the Weatherby Kalamazoo to the international community so that not everyone gets a go with it. Obviously it's helping everyone all the time, but so that like it's everyone's responsibility. It belongs to everyone, not just America. And part of me is like, how did that deal work out anyway? Because you said in the beginning that America and China helped build it. So like, how come America got to keep it, right? Oh, and you also learn that the smarmy guy is his brother. It's Jake's brother, and it's his little brother, and he like still has kind of a chip on his shoulder about his older brother being like so difficult and being so smarmy and difficult. It's at this point I start thinking like these satellites are never explained how they control the weather. It's just like, well, sometimes they release little magic weather pellets, sometimes they shoot a laser, sometimes they just fan open like some kind of solar machine flower and just go, ha, and everything down on the planet is better again, and that's kind of it. And they never really go into it, and I'm glad they didn't, because I bet the explanation they would have come up with would have been dumb. The satellites do that, live with it. I did. We're up on this space station, and you see that this guy is looking at the satellite that went wonky, and he takes something off of it, and he's like, ooh, and then he walks away with it secretively, and you're like, oh, they're a bit suspect. But then, well, there's like this character who's clearly supposed to be a dickhead, and he's like, oh, I'm British and I'm on this space station, and he's played by Robert Sheehan. Do you know who that is? He's the stupid, annoying immortal one from that show Misfits on E4. Oh, also, I think he was in that show, Oh, what's it called? He was also in that show on Netflix where they play like, there's like loads of siblings and they've got numbers, not names, and they've got no dad and they've all got like superpowers. It was like Umbrella Coachella or something. Like, oh, Umbrella Chronicles. So like, yeah, anyway, back on topic. The guy who has the stuff that he just got off of the satellite, he takes that and he runs through the station. Well, he doesn't run, he's like moving suspiciously-ish, and then like he goes past Robert Sheehan and he makes some kind of quip like, meh. And then he gets sucked out. He gets sucked out of the space station. Like there's some kind of malfunction or something. And the guy that just got the information off the satellite, gone. So smarmy little brother goes to where Jake is now living in the desert, right? And his house is like, I think one of those shuttle caravans, like those aluminium caravan type things. And he's also got a daughter and he's living out like in the countryside. I think it's a bit deserty. And his daughter's really smart and quippy, which obviously because he's smart and quippy, so we have to show that he'd raise a smart, independent, quippy daughter. So then smarmy little brother is like talking to his niece, the little girl, and he's like, there was a time when me and your dad were so close, we had our own little secret code. And Jared Butler's like, no, we didn't, and a scowl. And he's clearly like still got a chip on his shoulder about it, right? But then at that point I was like, oh, they used to have a secret code. What a funny time to bring that up. I wonder if that will become relevant later when we're waist deep in intrigue and mystery. Spoiler alert, obviously it does, or they wouldn't have said anything. Chekhov's gun, right? And at this point I'm like, oh, his accent is so bad, like so. Well, I mean, you know, it could be worse, right? It could be worse. It's in this kind of like midpoint where it's definitely not as bad as like your mate doing accents at a party when he definitely can't do accents and you just want him to shut up. And it's also not, you know, he's not Meryl Streep. So then, like, you know, there's loads of other natural disasters popping off and everything. The whole world's getting like, you know, well, not the whole world. Like, I think maybe it was like Tokyo or something, had like this kind of massive heat wave and it burst all of the gas mains and stuff. But then this was the point in the movie at which I noticed that Gerard Butler, his face seems to change. And I mean that in the literal sense. At the point where he is at the caravan with his family and his, you know, his little brother and his daughter, he just seems to have more weight on the face than he does in the following scene when he's being slung into space. Which I'm going to use as a segue to talk about how the production of this film sounds like it was a total nightmare, right? So the guy that directed this movie is called Dean Devlin, and this is his directorial debut. He's got plenty of experience in Hollywood though. He's been a producer for quite a number of years. He's been producer on films like Independence Day Resurgence, and Godzilla. So like, he's got good disaster movie chops, right? The production of this movie started in early 2014 and it had a budget of $82 million and it wrapped in early 2015. But by the end of 2015, it got really, really bad test screenings, right? They decided they were going to finance $15 million in reshoots. In these reshoots, they also, I think they recasted a character, they introduced an entirely new character, put a pin in that, that was actually a good choice. And an additional producer was also brought on called Jerry Bruckheimer, who also had a lot of relevant experience. He was a producer on movies like Pearl Harbor and Armageddon and the Bad Boys series, right? So these people, between them, they have like some good experience. But in the end, the movie released a whole 18 months after it was initially supposed to be released, right? So as you can imagine, a lot of stuff got delayed, a lot of stuff went on. So this is sort of where I like did a bit of sort of little like investigative journalism, right? Now I don't care that he looked a bit heavier in some scenes from others, right? I think he's gorgeous all the time. This isn't about fat shaming or anything like that. I'll get to the point of it after I've explained what I think my theory behind it is. Gerard Butler starred in a film called Den of Thieves, which started shooting in January 2017. Now it's pretty widely publicised that he gained about, you know, between 12 and 15 kilograms for this role in Den of Thieves, right? Now, reshoots for Geostorm were done in December 2016, right? So maybe months, depending on how like strict these things are, between each other, right? So you have a 50-year-old actor who has to go from loner scientist to Los Angeles head of police, action hero, whatever it is he is in that movie, and put on all this muscle. Now, gaining in a very short amount of time 12 to 15 kilograms of muscle is going to involve gaining a notable amount of fat, right? Because that's just the way that muscle gain works. Like, because you have to be in a calorie surplus, as far as I'm aware, right? If you're a qualified nutritionist, please do correct me in the comments. It's very difficult to gain muscle without gaining fat. So he's clearly been bulking, right? And so he's put on all of this bulk and then they've been like, right, you have to come back for reshoots. And he's like, okay, but I'm shooting this film in a month. I'm not going back to the size I was because I need this fluff. So this is why I think maybe Jerry looks a bit more generous in some of the scenes in the beginning. I think those are the scenes that were reshot, right? Like, I think those are the scenes shot at another time. What I saw there was how the sausage is made, right? Like, what I saw there was how these actors have incredibly busy schedules and have to make incredibly steep differences to their bodies on very tight timelines, right? So then when you throw in the fact that some movies need reshoots and stuff like that, maybe they're not always going to match up perfectly. I mean, the other example, right, being the fact that they had to CGI out Henry Cavill's mustache because he wasn't gonna shave it off, right? Remember all about that? And it just goes to show that actors in general aren't a normal standard to hold ourselves to, right? Like, this is a 50-year-old man who clearly isn't living in his like normal body for what his lifestyle would allow, because for these movies he has to kind of work his way up and down whenever it requires it. God, like, I imagine as well, I'm talking about this for a man in Hollywood. This clearly hits women much more, but that's not the discussion we're going to have in this video. All that, you know, I'm telling you from this is that it's interesting to see how the reshoots affected the movie. And this was sort of my point at which I discovered there was such severe reshoots, retooling, re-editing, rewriting, right? Was because one scene to the next, I was like, oh, it looks like he looks more gaunt. Like, looks like he's lost weight around the face. And Ben saw it too as well when we were sat there watching it. So then, where were we? Oh yeah, so then they fire Gerard Butler into space, right? So then he's headed off, he's makes it to the space station and he's welcomed and stuff like that. And he has a bit of like sexy banter with the German head of science. You know, he's very much a lad's lad. Even though, like, I think in interviews, Gerard Butler has been like, you know, oh, he's so different from the like bombastic action heroes I play. And I was just like, no, he's not, Jerry, honestly. And reshoots relevant, again, this is the part of the film in which we meet the character who was added entirely during reshoots, and she's fucking cool. Like, I think she's probably my favourite character in the film. She's this like incredibly highly intelligent black woman who is a hacker, basically. She's like the best hacker that Smarmy Brother knows, and she works for the White House, and she's intelligent. She knows what's going on between people. She knows that he's having it off with the Secret Service lady who's not played by Brie Larson. And when he asks for her help, she's like, sure, but you're going to keep me involved in this because this sounds like big stuff and I need to be working on big stuff if I'm going to get out of this little cubicle. Like, she knows what she's about, she's funny, she's intelligent, and she was a very good addition, I think, in a movie full of really quite bland action movie characters. Also, Smarmy Little Brother and Gerard Butler, while he's on the space station and he's not, like, they constantly have conversations on this huge comm screen, and I'm like, that, to me, sounds so inconvenient. If you need a video call with someone, don't build a room for it. Who's taking all that gear up there? Just like use your iPhone or something. Or they make a point of showing that they have this like these snappy, snazzy pop-out little holographic phones, and everyone has them. So like, use that. Like, why have you got to have a room for it? I suppose you wouldn't be able to get enough on screen otherwise. So it's probably just a cinematography choice, which we really can't just, you know, crap on because it makes everyone look like an idiot. Gerard Butler has to go out into space on the outside of the station in a spacesuit to collect like a hard drive from outside, and on his way back the suit goes haywire and the little jets on the back of it start going off and spinning him around, and he loses control, and then when he finally does get back in, he's like, oh no, I lost the hard drive, and everyone's like, oh shit, never mind, oh sorry. And then he's like, oh actually I didn't lose the hard drive, he says to the German head of science, and she's like, oh. And so then like he starts investigating what's going on, knowing that someone there is like, you know, tried to kill him, like set off his suit deliberately. So, you know, begin intrigue and mystery. And remember earlier when we were talking about mystery and intrigue, what went with that was the code. So now that mystery and intrigue has begun, almost immediately he starts talking to his brother in that coded language they talked about earlier. And they find out that someone is weaponizing Dutch Boy. No, they find out that someone is weaponizing the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and it's targeting cities deliberately, and they think it's to try and get in the way of the handover of the Weatherby Kalamazoo to the international community, which is like, it makes sense, right? And at this point, you're led to believe they start going down the route of being like, only the people in the highest positions of power could possibly sign off this kind of thing. It must be the president. Whereas almost most of the time we've known the president, there's also been this like Secretary of State who looks very evil, speaks very evilly, and sits there being menacing looking the whole time. And so I was like, okay, I think it's actually him and the president's a red herring. No, what was it? What happened then? I don't know. I don't think anything big happens in between. Oh, then the station explodes, or it starts setting off, you know, the station basically sets off like a chain of events that's going to cause a geostorm, the titular geostorm, right? Which is just basically a storm that's big enough to destroy the planet or whatever. And then the station starts to self-destruct. And everyone's like, oh, we have to do something. We have to stop it from self-destructing. And little British boy is nowhere to be found. Now, I already had bad feelings about little British boy, not just because he had a bad accent either, but because he was the only one that you see in the beginning, right? Like, you remember I said to you, the guy that found the bit of the broken satellite and then he got sucked out of the ship. On the way through, you see a little quippy one-liner come from the British dude who's acting like an asshole. There's plenty of other named characters on this crew that we didn't see at that moment, and this film has already proved it's pretty ham-fisted with its foreshadowing, so I was like, before this thing had even happened, I was like, oh, so the British dude's going to be a man on the inside up on the space station. And then he's not there when everything starts popping off, and it's like, oh, here we go. I bet I'm going to be right about the Prezi. But anyway, Gerard Butler goes and finds him and naturally just kicks the shit out of him, but then he has a gun, and so then, you know, it's kind of like, oh, the only way that he could beat down Gerard Butler is by making it unfair, right? Because Gerard Butler's like this big, manly kind of scientist. Again, trying to be like, oh, he's so complex and he's a thinker and he's a scientist. And it's like, he's an action hero, okay? And, oh, they're fighting with a gun, and then Robert Sheehan like shoots a window accidentally and it's like cracking, and so then they're fighting over the gun, it gets kicked away, and so then Robert Sheehan goes for the gun, and Gerard Butler, because he's smart, see, he runs for the door, and then he gets to the door and the door's shut, and then Robert Sheehan looks down at the glass and he's like, and then like it gets sucked out, and then it cracks, right? So then he sucks him out and then he's gone. And so then he is dead. They figure out that there's a virus in the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and what they're going to have to do to cure this virus, right? Can you guess? To cure this virus in this computer that encircles the planet, they're going to turn it off and turn it on again. And that should flush out the virus. So what they do is they figure out that they're going to need to get kill codes for this thing in order to shut it down. Like, Gerard Butler can't do it by himself. He needs kill codes that come from the highest point in government. He even says something like, he says something along the lines of like, this isn't a Chromebook. You can't just hold down the power button. And I'm like, who says that? Who has a Chromebook? Who says... I don't think we're at a point where you can say Chromebook instead of computer. Do you know what I mean? Or laptop. You can't do that. I think it was only a very brief time when people were saying iPhone instead of smartphone, and it was only like old people, right? But that for me smacked of very obvious product placement. Like, they probably got a cool 100 grand for that off the movie's budget or whatever. You can't just say Chromebook and expect me to not think that Google's paid you. And then that's when we find out as well, at that point, that yeah, we were right, the evil looking guy is evil, and we shouldn't make assumptions, but yet again, they were right. So then there's this scene where they find out that the president is the codes, because the codes is biometrics. It's like his 10 fingerprints and his 2 eye scans. And so they're like, oh fuck, we got to kidnap the president. And then the reason that they found that out is because the bad guy told them. And it's like, I know that this isn't, why would the bad guy tell them? Why would you tell them? Like, he knows that he's basically leading Smarmy Guy away so that he can kill him, because he's like, right, this guy's figured it out. We've got to just finish him off. Get him out of the way. And then he tells him on the way there that the kill codes are the president's finger scans and stuff. Why would you do that? Conceal that information. But lucky them, he did tell them, and so now they know exactly what they have to do, and they get the president out of the conference they're in or something like that. I don't know, I think there's some upcoming election. And then they talk about how the bad guy's plan was to like attack this convention with, it's like a democratic convention, I think, with the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and then it would mean that everyone in the line of succession would be killed, and then this guy would become the president. And that got me thinking, like, is that how presidency works? Is there a line of succession? Like, it's not like he's the king, right? I mean, in this country, you might have an acting prime minister, but if the prime minister was killed, you'd hold, like, the country would choose a new leader for that party. Is it like... I don't know. Let's just pretend that there are various princes in the American government just waiting for the president to abdicate so they might rise to the throne. So they've got him out, right? They've got the president out, and at this point, Secret Service Abby is like, she's got the president on the back seat, who's chatting to Smarmy Boy, chatting up her boyfriend, and she's driving through like these paths of lightning and stuff, and she's just, you know, she's been a total badass. She was so sick, and I was like, oh, hang on, I really love the female characters in this movie. And then it got me thinking, because whenever I think about like a movie that has cool female characters, the back of my head is like, but do they talk to each other? Does it pass the Bechdel test? And whether or not the Bechdel test is a like valid criticism of movies, I believe it is, but that's not a hill I'm going to die on right now, because it's just something that I think is a very simple check to highlight something that is very easily done, very simple, right? And my favourite female characters, the hacker and Secret Service Abby, they only talk to each other once, and it's about a broken wine glass. And like, so I guess technically it passes, depending on how you define it. Because I know some people define it as they have to talk to each other for like 20 seconds, is it? Or something like that. But otherwise, it's just that there needs to be two female characters who have names, who talk about something other than a man. And I guess they do, because the hacker breaks a wine glass in Secret Service Abby's house, and they talk about the glass. So then we're seeing like scenes all over the world of the Weatherby Kalamazoo just going totally nuts. And it's like, you know, somewhere there's a huge tidal wave, and then somewhere else there's like ice freezing, like flash freezing, sorry. And then it gets too hot somewhere. And then like somewhere else there's like a laser. Like there's just a fucking laser just coming down from the sky, right? Like, could you imagine if you turned on the fucking weather report and they were just like, and in the north we have lasers pushing down from the south. And the bad guys, like, you know, overnight we would have ended all America's enemies and America would be back on top and stuff like that. But they show a map of the areas that are being affected by, you know, these storms and stuff. And it seems to literally be like everywhere but America. And is that the kind of world that you think anyone could prosper in? Like, you're not going to have any imports. There's not going to be any economy. There's not going to be anything. It's dumb. It's dumb. So there's like a ticking clock until the Geostorm, because there's always a ticking clock, isn't there? Like there has to be. And you find out that the kill codes that the president have will like shut down the Weatherby Kalamazoo, but they won't stop the self-destruction of the space station. So Jake has to sacrifice himself to turn off the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and he's not going to be able to save himself from the station. So he gets all of the other crew and stuff and puts them on shuttles to get them out of there, and he goes to sacrifice himself to shut everything down. And like he gets into this big server room and he puts in the codes and everything. Oh no, like he gets stuck outside the server room, and then the lady who's the head of science like turns up and she lets him in the door, and then he does it. And the screens are all green and everything's brilliant and everything's great and everyone's, you know, the world is saved. And this the lady who's head of science, who they refer to constantly as the German scientist, I honestly don't remember her name. I'm not sure. She feels really sort of like plonked on. I don't think that she's not a very fleshed out character. She kind of exists to float around Jake in the kind of way that like you wouldn't be surprised if they were just like, they revealed that she was a hallucination of his, because she doesn't seem to interact with anyone else. She just seems to have like flirty banter, like a bit of flanter with Jake all over the space station. And occasionally, I feel like half of her lines were like, I live here, when she does something with the space station that Jake doesn't know how to do. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, she's just not very well developed. She was kind of an empty character in the way that really just makes it feel like, oh, this film needs to have a heterosexual romance. We need to show he's virile by showing that he has sexual interest from somebody. And I just thought that that was really quite hollow, and it would have probably been better if she hadn't been there. Or even better, if she'd have just been a bit more fleshed out. Like, I guess they couldn't reshoot everything, but seeing what a good job they did with the hacker character on the surface, it's like, why couldn't the science lady be as good as Secret Service Annie and the hacker character, right? Anyway, so then everything blows up, like everything, like the space station, it's gone. And then the ground feed they've had of the space station, which is like they're looking at the space station, it's not on the space station, this feed cuts. And it's like, well, the feed wasn't on the space station because it was visibly from away from it, so you could see it. So you could see everything blowing up. But, you know, drama, it cuts and they don't know what's happening, they don't know what's going on. But then it turns out that Jake and the science lady got into a pod and they're rescued. And everyone's safe and sound and rescued. So then Jared Butler lands and he reunites with his family and his little brother, and everything's hunky-dory and everything's great. They've saved the world, the station is blown up, but I don't know if the station's blown up, how is the satellite still working? Like, how is the Weatherby Kalamazoo still working. Because earlier on in the movie, they're like, oh, if it's down for even an hour, if it's not working for even an hour, horrible things could happen. And so now it's like, well, there's no control tower, so what's it doing now? And it's going to take a while to get a new one up there. Oh, and there was like they threatened a dog in one of the locations where the weather was getting terrible, but then it turns out that the dog lives. And so there's like the dog lives moment. And that is it. And then at the end, you find out that they've rehired Jake to help lead the new control center, the new command center, to run Dutch Boy, or as we are going to keep calling it, the Weatherby Kalamazoo, and everything's happy. And he has a good time with his daughter and his brother, and everything's great again, apart from his marriage is still broken down, but everyone seems to be cool with it. You know, it's got some really fun effects in places, bad CGI effects in others. If, you know, you can turn off your kind of, if you're a bit of a film snob, switch that off straight away. You're not going to have any fun. And there's so much fun to be had, right? Like, this film is knowingly trash. If you know what you're doing and you know what you're watching, it's really like, I just had a lot of fun watching it because I let myself have fun with it, right? And you know what? Mr. Commode is probably right. It is stupid. It's a stupid film. None of it makes sense. Crazy satellites that bomb the weather is dumb. And would I recommend you watch it? No. No, yeah, I would. I would say watch it. It's good. It's good fun. Especially, you know, everyone's always paralysed by choice these days. Enjoy your trash. Watch your trash. This film, I recommend it. Watch it. Even if just to say, hey, have you seen it? Okay. Bye. Bye to you in particular, Gerard Butler. It's Jared Butler, isn't it? I keep forgetting, but it's Jared Butler. I swear, like I saw an interview once where he was like, it's Jared, like the American name Jared. It's not Gerard. Americans all want to say Gerard, and that's how I learnt to say it. Bye then.